The name of this tutorial is Ira Krakow's Blender 2.49b Snap Tools 1 tutorial. One of the most important skills in Blender mesh modeling is the ability to position objects precisely. This is especially true in architectural models where you can closely follow a blueprint, or in a product model where you need to position a part, such as the tires or doors on a car, exactly. If your mesh is complicated, it can be a difficult task because of the many vertices or faces that are close together. Blender provides a number of tools that make it much easier to position objects more exactly. A commonly used tool is a snap menu, which will be the subject of this tutorial, which, combined with an understanding of how the 3D cursor and the transform widget work, should help a lot. I want to make the explanation simple because this topic often confuses beginning Blender users. I know this because at my forum at forum.irakrakow.com and in emails, I've been asked these types of object positioning questions many times. We'll use an example, the common task of positioning columns precisely above and across a ground plane. I use Blender 2.49b. So start with the default scene. We'll keep the default cube and first go into front view, numpad 1. You can tell if you're in front view if the blue arrow, the z-axis, is pointing upward. Add a plane, space, add mesh, plane. Press the Z key to go into wireframe mode. That way we'll see the geometry better. Select the cube. We'll scale the cube a bit so it looks a bit like a column. To do that, press the S key, then the Z key, then 3, then enter. To scale the cube up 3 times in the Z direction. Scale the plane up 5 times. Right-click to select, then S, 5, and enter. Zoom out 3 or 4 times using the num minus key. Panning with the middle mouse button or the Alt left mouse button if you've selected the Emulate 3-button mouse button in the Preferences menu shows that the cube, the basis for our column, is half above the plane and half below it. Don't worry, we'll fix this. Our first job is to snap the column to the top left corner of the ground plane. First, let's locate the 3D cursor and the transform widget. Left-click anywhere a few times in the 3D window. The 3D cursor is the circular icon with a cross that follows you where you click. You can find out where the 3D cursor is by clicking on the View Properties from the View menu. Note how the X, Y, and Z coordinates of the 3D cursor change as you click in different areas of the 3D window. Where the selected object is another matter entirely. Select the cube. Press the N key to bring up the Transform Properties window. The Lock X, Lock Y, and Lock Z coordinates show the center of either the selected object or objects. Right now the cube is centered at 0, 0, 0, as is the plane. Moving the column around to try to get it to align to the top left corner of the plane by just grabbing it with the G key is difficult. Here's a way to get an exact snap. First, select the column cube. Tab into Edit mode. Right-click on the bottom left vertex and select it. Note that while the 3D cursor hasn't changed its position, the Transform Properties window is telling us that the selection is at the vertex with x minus 1, y equals 1, and z minus 1. The Transform widget has moved to that position as well. We're going to use the Snap menu to position the column exactly. Press Shift-S to bring up the Snap menu. The menu has options which either move the selection or move the 3D cursor. We're going to reposition the 3D cursor at the selection. Select Cursor to Selection. This moves the 3D cursor to the selection. Now the 3D cursor is on the exact position as the vertex we selected. X equals minus 1, y equals 1, and z equals minus 3. If that's true, how come the vertex x, vertex y, and vertex z coordinates are different? That's because the coordinates are different. Click the global button in the Transform Properties window. Now the coordinates match. The original vertex position was in local coordinates, positioned relative to the object center. The next step is to tab out of Edit mode. In the Mesh Tools panel, there are a series of buttons related to changing the center of selected objects. Right now, the column's object center is 0, 0, 0. We want it to be at the selected vertex, minus 1, 1, minus 3. To do that, go to the Edit buttons, F9, and click Center Cursor. Now the Transform widget showing the center of the post is exactly at the selected vertex. Next, select the ground plane. Press Shift S and select Cursor to Selection. In the Transform Properties window, note that the plane is selected and the cursor is at -5, 5, 0 in global coordinates. This is also the position of the cursor. Tab out of Edit mode. Select the column. Press Shift S again. This time select Selection to Cursor. The column snaps to the upper left corner of the ground plane. Let's repeat this procedure to create a new column and snap it to the upper right vertex of the plane. First, press Shift D to create a duplicate of the column. Move the duplicated column a bit so we can see it as an individual column. Tab into Edit mode. Select the upper right vertex of the column. Press Shift S to bring up the Snap menu and select Cursor to Selection. Tab into Object mode. From the Edit buttons, F9, in Mesh Tools, click Center Cursor. Select the plane. Tab into Edit mode. Select the plane's upper right vertex. Press Shift S and then select Cursor to Selection. Tab out of Edit mode. Select the column. Press Shift S. Select Selection to Cursor. The column should snap in place. Now for the fun part. How can we position a beam across the columns? First, go to Front View, Num1. With the column selected, press Shift D to duplicate. Move the column a bit so we can see it individually. Rotate the column on its side 90 degrees. R, 90, Enter. So now it looks like a beam. Tab into Edit mode. Select the lower left vertex of the cube. From the Edit button, select the Center Cursor button. Select the original column. Tab into Edit mode. Select the upper left vertex of the column. Press Shift S to bring up the Snap menu. Select Cursor to Selection. Now tab out of Edit mode, select the beam, press Shift S, and select Selection to Cursor. The beam doesn't extend to the end of the second column. This is easy to fix. Note that the dimensions of the beam are 2 by 2 by 6 Blender units. Select the plane. Note that its dimensions are 10 by 10. Reselect the beam. Change Dim X to 10. Now the beam fits exactly on the two columns for the dimension of the ground plane. In the next part of our Snap Tools tutorials, we'll look at snapping objects in more depth, including a discussion of the Transform Snap tool. If you enjoyed this tutorial, hit the YouTube subscribe button. Also, ask your questions about this video at my Blender 3D forum, forum.irakrakow.com. Happy blendering!